Today on another episode of the Danville Discussion.
Gadgets through the ages. This exhibit was made for us, Ferb. Hey, what are all those people looking at?
And this is one of our most curious pieces, a time machine made by a 19th century scientist named Xavier Onassis. But of course we know he never finished it, or else we'd still see him here today. Right? Anyone?
All right, moving on.
A time machine, huh? Ferb, I know what we're gonna do today. Right. Let's fix us a time machine.
And welcome to the Danville Discussion, a podcast about all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. My name is Caleb Durkin, and some of you may know me from my YouTube channel of the same name, where some web series related to animation such as Caleb Reviews lives. If this is your first time listening to the Danville Discussion, well, let me be the first to say that everything will be explained to you in the title. It is a podcast where I go into each episode of either Phineas and Ferb or Hamster and Gretel, and I also go through all the cultural and in-universe references, along with some of my favorite moments, some fun facts, and anything like that, and then finally I will end things off by giving each episode a roller coaster rating. So, for today's episode, we are going to look at episode 7 of Phineas and Ferb, which in this case is a full half hour's worth of a single episode. Like, this is not like your average episode with 2 segments. And this single half hour episode is called It's About Time. If you want to check out more episodes of the Danville Discussion, then head over to anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen and it'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion website on Anchor. You can also share your feedback or ask some questions you may have about this episode by emailing us at danvillediscussion@gmail.com with the series and episode title in the subject line. Now, before I start today's episode, I have some updates to go over regarding the recently announced Phineas and Ferb revival and Season 2 of Hamster and Gretel, because as I'm recording this at the beginning of this month, it has been 15 years since Phineas and Ferb officially premiered on Disney Channel after 2 episode previews where Flop Stars was aired. And of course, I've already talked about it in a previous episode of the Danville Discussion, if you want to listen to that. But back onto the updates, on TikTok, Dan Povenmire himself confirmed that both the Phineas and Ferb revival and Hamster and Gretel Season 2 will come out sometime in 2024, and that they're going to finish up Season 1 of the latter this year. And because of this, I believe it should take as long as it took for Candace Against the Universe to be released on Disney Plus after its announcement back in the spring of 2019. Next, also on TikTok, Disney Channel posted a celebratory video on the same day where Dan would answer some fan questions regarding his favorite Phineas and Ferb episode, the main inspiration for the show, why Phineas's biological father and Ferb's biological mother are not in the show, if the brothers are real, his favorite song from any show he's ever done, whether it's Phineas, Milo, or Hamster and Gretel, plus his other favorite Phineas songs. But the biggest question is, of course, about the revival, and if I can quote Dan, Disney was very clear saying they don't think it's broken. We don't need to fix it. We've done 2 other shows in the meantime, of course, Milo and Hamster. And I think we're just going to use our experience from that time and throw it back into this universe. So I think what they're trying to do is make the revival stand out so that it doesn't break the logic of what previously happened. Still, I don't know what other directions this revival is going to take, if it's going to be part of the original summer, or if it's set immediately after or a year later. But this is still a wait-and-see scenario because the new seasons haven't begun production yet. It's still in early development. I'm still positive that it'll go in the right hands, and that it could go the same way as the Hulu revival of Futurama. So again, best of luck to Dan and the original team if they come back on board. And if you guys are willing to watch the new Phineas and Ferb and Hamster and Gretel Season 2, they will be coming out on Disney Channel and Disney Plus in 2024. But now with that out of the way, let's get to the actual episode. And now, when did It's About Time first premiere? Now, this episode premiered on Disney Channel on Saturday, March 1st, 2008, and the day before that, it was shown on Disney Channel in Poland on February 29th, which was Leap Day, and this one is marked the 20th episode in broadcast order. And now, without further ado, let's get into It's About Time. So, It's About Time was a story by Dan Povenmire. It was storyboarded by John Barry, Mike Roth, Ken Osborne, and Aliki Theophilopoulos, and directed by Dan Povenmire. So, what happens in this episode? Now, our first act of this, it finds the Flynn-Fletcher family walking through the Danville Museum. Lawrence finds a dog skeleton, which was found in their neighborhood, and Phineas notices the collar saying Bucky, and recalls when they used to have a dog named Bucky who got sick and went to live on Kindly Old Man Simmons' farm. Ironically, Lawrence continues on and finds a human skeleton, being Kindly Old Man Simmons, and asks, "Who's up for milkshakes?" Ferb taps Phineas on the shoulder and points to an exhibit. Phineas's eyes immediately fall on a sign that says Gadgets Through the Ages. They enter the exhibit and find a tour guide talking to several people about a time machine invented by Xavier Onassis that was never finished, because if it were, he'd still be alive today. That's kind of silly. Thinking that he would be alive enough to finish that time machine in itself. So, yeah, he didn't finish it before he died, I'm assuming. Phineas realizes that he wants to fix the time machine and exclaims that he knows what they're going to do today, but he then asks where Perry went, and Perry, or Agent P, enters into his lair through a photo booth, which is a strange yet interesting lair entrance. He sees Major Monogram frozen on the monitor because Monogram was zapped by a new invention that Dr. Doofenshmirtz has, called the Freezinator. Carl then comes on and tells Perry to stop Doofenshmirtz. In production order, this is the first appearance of Carl, the intern for the OWCA. It's the same name, but with different initials, a C and a K. He's voiced by Tyler Alexander Mann, whose first voice acting role was Linus in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown from 1985.
Agent P? Hey, it's me, Carl. The intern? We got a bit of a situation here. Major Monogram has been frozen like this pretty much all day. Solid as a rock. Oh, sorry. Anywho, if the Major were able to, I'm sure he'd say, well, ouch, first of all, am I right? But seriously, I'm sure he'd say Doofenshmirtz was up to something and you should get to the bottom of it. Am I right, sir? I'm gonna take that as a yes. Good luck, Agent P.
As Linda and Lawrence are looking at a fossil as the only representation of the Glitiola species from the Jurassic era, Candace sees Phineas and Ferb fixing the time machine and takes apart from the time machine, which plays a major role in going back in time, all in an attempt to expose it to their mom. But then Phineas puts two wires together, reversing a few seconds, and Candace runs off with the piece for a second time. This part would be one of my highlights from this episode.
Why do I have to endure this suffering while Phineas and Ferb are off who knows where doing who knows... What are you doing?
Fixing a time machine.
You broke the exhibit? I'm telling Mom. What are you doing? You broke the exhibit? I'm telling Mom.
Cool.
So then Isabella and the Fireside Girls show up, and Isabella asks what Phineas is doing. He says that the brothers are fixing the time machine, and for the second time since Roller Coaster, Isabella wonders if it's impossible, but Phineas says it's a possibility, and Isabella tells him that she and her troupe are going to the local fossils exhibit. Meanwhile, Perry meets Doofenshmirtz at his building, accompanied by the normal jingle,
Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated!
But sees Doof's silhouette in the window, showing that he is fighting with an evil ray gun. Perry is surprised and enters the building, and it seems Dr. Doof is trying to hide something, but we see a paw print on his face, and Doof makes up a lie, claiming to have mice in the building, which was also said in I, Brobot, the first time in broadcast order and the second in production order. And then Perry goes over to a closet that's shaken and sees Peter the Panda in it, but Doof tries to deny deny knowing Peter, saying they're not enemies, they're just bad friends.
I wouldn't go in there if I were you. Perry the Platypus, I swear I've never seen this secret agent-looking panda before. There's a panda in my closet and a panda paw print on my cheek. But it's not what you think. We're not enemies. We're just bad friends.
Candace yells for her mom before getting sent outside the museum by a security guard who says that she has broken a major rule by yelling. After getting thrown out because of it, Candace meets a boy outside the museum that stole a pterodactyl. And said teenage boy was voiced by Vincent Martella, who also does Phineas.
You got tossed out too, huh?
Yeah, for yelling.
You yelled in the museum? That is hardcore.
Why'd you get thrown out?
Stole a pterodactyl. Well, it's not like I yelled.
You gotta help me sneak back in! Please, please, please!
Whoa. Okay. I've got a plan. So ingenious. It involves military-like stealth, precision, and timing.
He decides to help her and creates a diversion by yelling, causing all the security guards to get attracted to him, while Candace sneaks inside the museum, sees Jeremy, and goes to talk to him, finding out that the museum has a slushy dog outlet. Jeremy tells her that he is so bored that by the time his job finishes, he'll be part of the fossil exhibit. Candace laughs at that joke much like I did.
I'm so bored. Feels like by the time my shift is over, I'll be a part of the fossil exhibit.
Part of the fossil exhibit! That's a good one!
And spots a security guard entering the hall, causing her to run off. Back at the Gadgets Through the Ages exhibit, Phineas and Ferb are testing their newly fixed time machine as Phineas tests number 1. And just as Candace is calling for her mom, she gets teleported back to when she laughed at Jeremy's joke. Jeremy asks Candace where she ran off to, but Phineas tests number 2. Candace says that's a good one, as she rewinds back in time once again, and Jeremy laughs in a kinda confused way as Phineas tries out number 3. Then Candace laughs and says, "Hi Jeremy." Jeremy starts to get freaked out by that. The security guard then asks if Phineas and Ferb are a little young to be working in a museum, to which Phineas responds, yes I am, and then if they need anything else. So Phineas asks for the piece that Candace ran off with, and the security guard says he'll keep his eye out for it.
Hey, aren't you a little young to be working in a museum?
Yes I am.
Well, it's nice to see young people taking an interest in history. Can I get you boys anything? Anything at all?
Actually, there seems to be a piece missing. It looks sort of like this. Have you seen it?
Looks familiar. I'll keep my eye out for it.
Back at Doofenshmirtz's lair, Doof tells Perry the truth that Peter is his new nemesis, and states that they met at an evil genius expo in Seattle, and they immediately disliked each other, leading Peter to foil one of Dr. D's evil schemes. He says that he just wants a clean break, and as he gets back to fighting Peter, he notices Perry is still standing there, and he escorts Perry out of the building, where Perry notices the Freezinator, which is misspelled as Freezonator, with an A instead of an I, and then as Perry exits, Doof yells out, "Curse you, Peter the Panda!"
Curse you, Peter the Panda!
Which I liked as a spin on his usual saying about Perry, and it cuts back to the museum where Phineas tests number 4 and Candace gets transported right in front of the security guard. The security guard takes the piece away just as Phineas tests number 5, using a pun that I kinda liked.
And last, but certainly not least...
Mom!
The security guard asks if the boys need anything again. Phineas, a little confused, asks for the piece again. The security guard comes over and notices the piece in his hand and hands it to them, leading to the boys completing the time machine.
Can I get you boys anything? Anything at all?
Well, yeah. Like I said before, we seem to be missing this piece.
Looks familiar. I'll keep my eye out for it. Ah, there it is.
Cool. Thanks.
Back to Perry, it leads to the song When We Didn't Get Along, feeling heartbroken because his only nemesis has left him for another one. It's a very touching and heartbreaking song that made me feel bad for Perry since he felt left out, and it even reminds me of When She Loved Me from Toy Story 2.
The moments when we didn't get along.
during the song, we also have this montage of select previous episodes where Perry fought Doof in production order. These include Roller Coaster, Candace Loses Her Head, The Fast and the Phineas, Well-Known Beach Party of Terror, and Flop Stars. After Perry hangs up his fedora, Lawrence asks for money for the audio tour, and Candace tries to drag Linda over to the exhibit where Phineas and Ferb are fixing the time machine, which contains another highlight I have from this, where Candace has her breakout moment and she imitates the gestures of Ferb lifting his welding mask.
Mom! Phineas and Ferb are in the Gadgets Through the Ages exhibit, and they're doing something to this chair thing, and Ferb is using that hose thingy that makes sparks, and he's wearing that mask that goes like this. And you have to come with me right now! Please, 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 please!
Well, if it's that important to you.
Really? Did I ever tell you how much I love you? They're this way!
When Linda steps through the hall, Candace strays over to Phineas and Ferb right when they are testing the time machine. They wind back in time to 300 million BC, and when Phineas says, well, it's working now, there is one animation goof I spotted. If you pause at the correct time or scan the frames, you'll notice that the bottom half of his head disappears for one frame. Candace is impatient for the brothers to take her back to the present, but then a Tyrannosaurus Rex steps directly on the time machine, smashing it, and then Ferb says this line,
This could be a problem.
And then it cuts to commercial break, and that concludes part 1 of this episode. For my other highlights of this episode, I love when Perry thought Monogram wasn't moving when he got into the lair, and he would wave his arms around in a desperate attempt to get Monogram's attention before Carl showed up. Speaking of which, that's another favorite moment I've got. This whole scene with Carl was hilarious. And also, I love the first scene of Peter and Doofenshmirtz, where Doof would try to get Perry to understand about their relationship regarding himself and Peter. But the one thing that kind of felt a bit annoying to me is that teenage boy's yell, which reminded me of Lemongrab from Adventure Time with his high-pitched, obnoxious screaming every time he would speak. Good God.
We gotta say Yeller in Quadrant 6.
This castle is in unacceptable condition! Unacceptable!
Like, in terms of the characters that Vincent Martella voiced in this episode, I honestly prefer Phineas than that teenage boy, personally. One other cultural reference I didn't realize until now was the time machine itself. The one from the museum, and the design of it resembles the one made for the 1960 movie The Time Machine, which was based on the original book by H.G. Wells, and Wells may have popularized the idea of the time machine staying in exactly the same place during teleportation. At least that's a theory I have. So, that's Act 1, and because this is a half-hour episode of the show, I'm gonna do something special that I've never done before on this podcast, where I'm gonna go to a commercial break. So when we come back, we're gonna go ahead and finish off It's About Time, and then go through the rest of my highlights, other references, anything like that, because this is only the first half of it. So stay right where you are for this, we'll be right back.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with Phineas and Ferb.
So, Ferb, what should we do today?
There are 104 days of summer vacation. And 2 boys are determined...
What are you doing to Mom's car?
We tricked it out.
...to make every day count.
Whoa!
What you doing?
Building a roller coaster. Okay, Ferb, are we good to go?
Does he look a little bit young to be behind the wheel of a 700 horsepower racing machine?
Yes, he does.
Pulling up fast on the inside lane, it's number 42, Team Phineas!
Meet Phineas.
Do you like it?
You are in big trouble, mister!
Whatever.
And his brother, Ferb.
Does your stepbrother ever talk?
He's more of the man of action. Check it out.
Their sister, Candace.
That's it! You are going down, down, down!
And their pet platypus, Perry.
Good morning, Agent P.
Who doubles as a secret agent.
Hey, where's Perry?
Bent on saving the world from the evil Dr. Doofenshmirtz.
I'm just putting the finishing touches on my latest maniacal plan.
Together, they're gonna make this a vacation to remember.
Move, move! Oh, yeah!
Building a rocket, or fighting a mummy, or climbing up the Eiffel Tower. discovering something that doesn't exist, or giving a monkey a shower. Serving tidal waves, creating nanobots, or locating Frankenstein's brain.
It's over here!
Finding a dodo bird, painting a constant lid, or driving our sister insane.
Phineas and Ferb! Phineas and Ferb!
Whoa!
Featuring High School Musical's Ashley Tisdale.
I've got to take a new picture of myself for my blog.
And Hannah Montana's Mitchell Musso.
Candace, you're on the big screen.
So stick with us, cause Phineas and Ferb are gonna do it all. So stick with us, cause Phineas and Ferb are gonna do it all.
Only on Disney Channel.
Well, that was fun, but what should we do tomorrow?
We're back with more Phineas and Ferb.
And we are back. Now our next act goes to Phineas, Ferb, and Candace under attack by the T-Rex, with the brothers not making any sudden movements, while Candace, on the other hand, makes many arm movements and screams, causing the T-Rex to chase after her, and then I chuckled when they said, "Wow, it worked, let's go save Candace."
Whatever you do, keep your voices low and no sudden movements. Wow, it worked. Let's go save Candace. Follow that T-Rex. Wait, we don't have helmets.
So, Phineas and Ferb use a scooter and chase after Candace while wearing turtle helmets. Candace falls in the mud right where the footprint from the museum ends up being, and back in the present, Lawrence tries to show Linda, but the boys run over the Candace print with their scooter. Next up is another highlight where Candace tries to hide in the brush, only to run into these dinosaurs that look like her, and they imitate each other as the T-Rex chases them.
Hide in the brush!
The brothers then take Candace with them, where Candace suddenly has a turtle on her head to use as a helmet, and obviously this is a reference to the Flintstones, where some of the prehistoric technology that was used to be like modern tech are prehistoric creatures, and here they're using turtles as helmets. So all three escape the T-Rex from hanging onto leaves and vines in an Alamosaurus's mouth. By the way, we actually have a lot of references to Jurassic Park in this. I forgot to say for Act 1 that the T-Rex destroying the time machine is similar to when a T-Rex destroys a Jeep in the first movie. And for Act 2, the part where Candace and her dinosaur lookalikes are running from the T-Rex is just like when the T-Rex chased Dr. Grant, Hammond's grandchildren, and the Gallimimus. And also, when Phineas tells everyone not to move, Candace panics in a similar way to a scene in Jurassic Park 3, which I haven't seen yet because the first one is the only Jurassic Park film I've watched. And at this moment now, I notice that the music that plays when the three are being carried on the vines by the Alamosaurus sounds like the Jurassic Park theme.
Hey, what a stroke of luck. Look.
And how is this better?
This one's a vegetarian.
So it's not gonna eat us?
Nope.
Woohoo!
Excuse me. Yoo-hoo! Down here. Hi, we're made of meat, ma'am. Thanks.
A beautiful score by the legendary John Williams, and the first Jurassic Park I would say is one of Steven Spielberg's greatest works, right up there with Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and this is not counting his TV productions like Animaniacs. I think Alamosaurus, I'm sorry if I actually mispronounced it as Alamosaurus. I don't know. I don't know, but moving on, the siblings then walk back to the mud puddle and they realize the T-Rex footprint is the same footprint in the museum that Isabella and the Fireside Girls are currently looking at today, as mentioned earlier in the episode. So they write a message to Isabella saying that they are stuck in 300 million BC with dinosaurs, even though the first dinosaurs came 50 million years later, and for them to build another time machine to save them. Back at the Doofenshmirtz facility, where we hear the evil jingle a second time,
Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated!
Peter and Doof are fighting, and Peter rips a picture of Doof himself, and then Dr. Doof has a flashback to his first times with Perry, accompanied by a 60s style pop rock song called My Nemesis.
Ow! Easy, you're tearing it! Oh, I remember when this picture was taken. It was the happiest day of my life. It was the day I decided to get my picture taken. But it wasn't until I got outside the photo store that my life changed forever. I had a feeling that there was someone hiding behind the mailbox. I had a nemesis. My never, never, ooh, my never, 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 my never, never, ooh, my never, never.
Not only was Doof's backstory good, but the song itself was also a bop. It feels like Build Me Up Buttercup by The Temptations all over again. Correction, the artist behind Build Me Up Buttercup was actually the Foundations, not the Temptations. So let's continue. For some continuity fun facts, during the song, Agent 000 appears being interrogated by Dr. Doof, and he would later appear in Elementary, My Dear Stacy, and one of the singers of the song is seen again in Phineas and Ferb tackling Doofenshmirtz when he tried to kick the can in the song Couldn't Kick My Way Into Her Heart, and all the singers showed up in Candace Against the Universe during the Such a Beautiful Day number. Another continuity fun fact, this flashback would later be shown in the Milo Murphy's Law episode First Impressions, when Doofenshmirtz explains to Dakota how he first met Perry.
But it wasn't until I got outside the photo store that my life changed forever. I had a nemesis! And that was how I first met Perry the Platypus. So, how did you and that fussy old guy meet? It was a long time ago. In the future.
Now back onto the episode. Plus, at the end of the song, I liked when Dr. D was singing along and then he forgot what came after the bridge.
My nema nema, ooh, my nema nema nema. I forgot what comes after the bridge.
Afterwards, Peter takes his chance and dismantles the Freezinator, hurting Dr. Doof's feelings to the point where now he misses Perry as his nemesis. Back at the museum, Isabel and the Fireside Girls are building another time machine that looks identical to the original one, and the music that plays as this happens is an instrumental version of Go Go Phineas from the Fast and the Phineas.
Alright team, that should do it. Pile in. Okay, let her rip. Hold it.
They do what they ask, but Phineas misspells time machine without an M in time, making it say time machine, and as a result, it's now making neckties. But the real reason the time machine didn't work was because they didn't have the piece that kept teleporting Candace everywhere. And so Isabella takes matters into her own hands and constructs a real time machine to go back in time and get Phineas, Ferb, and Candace. Meanwhile, Perry and Doofenshmirtz attend Dr. Feelbetter's show, where all of the secret agents are gathered in one room.
Today on Dr. Feelbetter, I want to be your nemesis again. And now, Dr. Feelbetter!
And here, I was able to get at least one of the two cultural references there are for Dr. Feelbetter, that one being Dr. Phil, because I remember watching it a lot when I was young, watching it on CTV, as Dr. Feelbetter himself bears a strong resemblance to Dr. Phil McGraw, even showing some of Dr. Phil's similar speech patterns as a psychoanalyst. The other reference is Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me, and I never knew that because I have yet to get more into Austin Powers, but Doofenshmirtz, Perry, and Peter's appearances on the Dr. Feelbetter show is similar to that of Dr. Evil and his son, Scott Evil, on the Jerry Springer show in this Austin Powers movie. But the episode they're showing live is called I Want to Be Your Nemesis Again, and when Dr. Feelbetter asks Perry to share his thoughts, Doof corrects him that Perry can't talk because he's an animal, while trying to explain the actual reason he replaced Perry. Also, Dr. Feelbetter is voiced by Carlos Alazraqui, who's best known to voice characters like Rocco from Rocco's Modern Life. Doof then learns that Peter is backstage, and Peter walks down to the front of the stage. Back in 300 million BC, Candace is still stuck in the past, worrying about her future, while Phineas and Ferb are meditating, and then when Candace sits with her brothers, it begins to rain, with Candace deeming it the world's first bad hair day.
How long are we we supposed to just sit here?
I don't know. Ferb and I have decided to use this time as an opportunity to practice patience.
Lovely. Well, I suppose things can't get any worse. Oh look, the world's first bad hair day.
She notices the T-Rex behind them, and when she asks about the so-called rescue party they sent for, Phineas realizes that he misspelled time machine in the plans, and funny enough, Ferb replies, I hope that's not going to be an issue.
So Phineas, where's the rescue party you sent for?
It just occurred to me that I may have misspelled time machine on the plans.
Well, I hope that's not going to be an issue.
Just before Isabella travels back in time and saves the trio. But when everyone gets in the time machine and they try to set it off, they discover a problem with the vehicle. It needs to be plugged into a wall, but there was no electricity in prehistoric times. This infuriates Candace, and the T-Rex from earlier returns, causing her to tell him to put a sock in it, but they warn her about the sudden movements.
You mean to tell me you built a time machine that has to be plugged in? Oh, put a sock in it!
Candace, no sudden movements.
She even says, you mean to tell me you built a time machine that has to be plugged in? And that is a reference to Back to the Future, what Marty McFly says to Doc after learning about his time machine.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
And Candace continues to freak out, wondering where they're supposed to find electricity in Dinosaur Land, which is actually the name of the island setting of the Super Nintendo game Super Mario World, which marked the first appearance of Yoshi. But speaking of electricity, a bolt of lightning hits the cord as well as Candace, allowing the machine to work and sending everyone back to the present, which is also a reference to Back to the Future with the end of the first movie. Another cultural reference is where Candace's hair is sticking up after getting zapped by lightning, resembling that of the Bride of Frankenstein. However, since the T-Rex was standing near them, it too is brought back along with them and it starts to chase Candace again. Back at the Dr. Feelbetter studio, Peter is throwing the chairs into a stack, and Dr. Doofenshmirtz feels guilty and asks for Perry to be his nemesis again, and Perry accepts. Doof also breaks the fourth wall when he says that he promises to hurt Perry the right way, with cartoonish physical violence and elaborate traps made out of strange things he bought over the internet.
Perry the Platypus, I'm so sorry I hurt you. When I wasn't actually trying to hurt you. If you give me another chance, I promise to hurt you in the right way. With cartoonish physical violence and elaborate traps constructed out of strange things I've purchased over the internet. What do you say?
It's a good use of meta-humor, but I guess it didn't get to the TV censors who would prohibit any shows containing cartoon violence from being shown for kids, so yeah. Doofenshmirtz then traps all the agents in their chairs, and just when they thought Peter destroyed the Freezinator, it turns out it was just a decoy, and the crew rolls out the real Freezinator, literally named the real Freezinator. And Doof says he'll use his real Freezinator to freeze the agents to use as statues for his giant chess set. Though Perry successfully flips the Freezinator, which blasts a ray out the ceiling of the building and hits the T-Rex in the museum right when Candace is about to show her parents the dinosaur, even though before that she tried to stop her parents from going into the exhibit, and we see the T-Rex blinking aside, which brings us back to Jurassic Park in terms of cultural references. After Doof gets kicked in the head by Peter, this is then followed by all the animal agents setting themselves free from the chairs, then fighting and taking down all the evil villains, and then Agent P heads off back to his family. And the chair-throwing antics in the studio take us back to Austin Powers, in which they're reminiscent of the hijinks on Jerry Springer's talk show. Back at the museum, we have the There You Are running gag twice, and between those times, Phineas and Ferb are happy with what they did today in the museum, and Lawrence responds that these exhibits make the past seem so real.
Hey Mom, hey Dad, there you are, Candace. History is so exciting. We actually went back in time.
I know exactly what you mean, Finn. These exhibits make the past seem so real.
Hey, there you are, Perry.
All right, historians, let's head home.
As they leave, Jeremy points out that his favorite fossil is the C+J heart sign that Candace drew, making her blush. This also comes with another continuity fun fact. In a later episode, De Plane, Jeremy signs Candace's cast the same way she wrote C+J when she was brooding about not being able to go back to the present. Also, later on, Stacy mentions the events of this episode, meaning Candace told her about it. Then Jeremy sees a caveman display and wonders why they're wearing turtles as safety helmets, and that is the end of It's About Time.
Huh. That's funny. I never knew cavemen wore safety helmets.
A nice ending to a good homage to some of Spielberg's greatest films and productions. Yet in reality, there were no cavemen during dinosaur days. Oh well. Now, going through the rest of the highlights I have with this, the Linda and Lawrence subplot, while it wasn't that long, was very funny with them looking at the fossils and the changes to them.
Hey, I don't remember seeing this part. Hey, that looks just like Candace. Hey, honey, you've got to see this. Look, I'm telling you, it's the most peculiar thing I've ever seen. It looks just like Candace.
That's not very nice, dear.
I love when Phineas asks Candace what she's doing, and she responds as she's running from the T-Rex, "I'm running for my life! What does it look like?"
Hey, Candace, what are you doing?
I'm running for my life! What does it look like?
Well, hop on. Hit it, Ferb.
And I even laughed at Candace's part where she has the world's first bad hair day when it rains. Which brings up a cultural reference here, when Candace looks at the camera and says that things can't get any worse, and it suddenly starts raining. This also happens to Jane in Disney's Tarzan.
It can't get any worse, can it? Obviously it can.
Which is a very amazing and breathtaking adaptation of the original Edgar Rice Burroughs story, and I highly recommend it for any Disney animation fans. Even the Perry, Peter, and Doofenshmirtz subplot was a big highlight, possibly my favorite part of this episode. Regarding the Dr. Feelbetter scenes, I love this bit about how animals communicate.
Perry the Platypus, share with us your thoughts.
I'm sorry, he doesn't actually talk.
Ah, I see. And this communication issue is what led you to replace Perry the Platypus.
No, of course not. Peter the Panda doesn't talk either. He's a panda bear.
I see. Because he's an animal, he doesn't talk.
Of course not. What kind of an evil scientist are you?
The animation production for this is by Wang Film Productions, and as far as it goes, it's mostly very good. I love the use of squash and stretch for the character animation, especially on the dinosaurs and the animal agents, and the character designs of the evil scientists at the Dr. Feelbetter studio are very unique in terms of their cartooniness. I also love the shading for the lighting effects, like when they're about to go to 300 million BC, and the special effects themselves are stunning, even for an episode from 2008, plus I liked Phineas's large pupils when he would become amazed at the gadgets exhibit. Also, regarding the When We Didn't Get Along sequence, I already talked about how it reminded me of When She Loved Me from Toy Story 2, but even some of the animation for that scene is similar, as Dr. Doofenshmirtz would spin Perry around just like Emily did with Jessie back when the latter was her toy. But there are a few things that kind of felt off to me, like how Candace looks a bit weird at the beginning when we first entered the museum, plus Carl's earlobe is drawn differently instead of the usual 3 shape the first time he appears, and there is thick line art due to the use of pan close-ups during my nemesis. I understand that this is from 2008, but looking at the latter nowadays, it's very obvious because HD TV was only slowly getting more popular at the time. Now, there are plenty of other animation errors and goofs I was able to find that could have been fixed. When Isabel and the Fireside Girls walk over to Phineas for the first time, Katie isn't there, and when Isabella asks if time travel is impossible, Gretchen and Holly are missing, but in the next shot, they're back. Later, when the girls read the message in the fossilized footprint, Holly's beret isn't there, it's completely gone from her head and she's not wearing it, but after Isabella finishes reading the message, Holly is wearing her beret once again, and later on in the episode Mom's Birthday, Holly is seen without her beret again. In the same shot, Gretchen's skin color goes into the bottom half of her glasses, and Millie and Katie are also missing. In the following shot, when the Fireside Girls are tilting their heads as they read Candace's name, Addison's hair is superimposed over her beret, meaning the back of her hair is sticking out, and you couldn't even see that on the cropped pan and scan version that was initially shown on broadcast television and on the Fast and the Phineas DVD because Addison was on the right of the screen. And regarding the T-Rex, Tyrannosauruses have 2 fingers, but this one is seen with 3, which is a very common mistake in many animated series containing dinosaurs. Plus, when Peter the Panda breaks Dr. Doofenshmirtz's picture, Doof is holding it upside down, but in the next shot it's right side up, and at one point during My Nemesis, the tambourine becomes transparent if you pause at the correct time, and you'll see the outlines behind it. Then, as Katie is using the hammer on the time machine, her shirt collar is orange instead of red, and later when Phineas says it occurs, his shirt only has 2 orange stripes instead of 3 like usual. And then at the moment Isabella tells Phineas that there is an M in the word time of time machine, the whites of Gretchen's eyes can be seen, and when Candace gets struck by lightning, there's a space between Katie and Addison in the time machine since she was sitting there before, but when they get back to the Danville Museum in the present time, the gap is closed. And now to go through the remaining fun facts, some of which I may have missed on Act 1. Of course, this is the first 2-part episode if you split it into 2 11-minute segments. Plus, there's a My Little Pony Friendship is Magic episode with the same name, excluding the exclamation point in the title. This episode has 2 book adaptations, one of the same name, and the other is called Time Travel is Fun. Disney Channel Spain held a vote in 2009 to choose the best Phineas and Ferb episodes of 2008, and this episode and Dude, We're Getting the Band Back Together were the winners. Next, the songs When We Didn't Get Along and My Nemesis were both included on the first soundtrack album and were votable in the first musical Cliptastic Countdown, but they didn't make it to the top 10. When Dr. Feelbetter asked Doof to express his feelings for Perry, one of the closed captions has Doofenshmirtz misspelled as Doofenshmirtz with an A instead of an EN, even on Disney+. Seriously, caption guys, pay attention next time. Major Monogram didn't speak in this episode as a result of being frozen by the Freezinator, though he does grumble when Carl attempts to make a conversation with him. And the time machine was seen again in Phineas and Ferb's Quantum Boogaloo as part of a story arc. Agents D, F, R, C, O, K, H, and the kangaroo that also appears in Traffic Camp Caper can be seen in Dr. Feelbetter's studio, and this is also writer Damon Lindelof's favorite episode, and he would later go on to do the story of a later episode, Lost in Danville. For the milestones, this is the first time we see Perry crying, the first time someone other than Perry goes to fight Doofenshmirtz, and we later see this with Planty the Potted Plant in No More Bunny Business, the Dodo Bird in Last Train to Busville, the Platypus from the Danville Zoo in Misperceived Monotreme, and Dioge in the Milo Murphy's Law episode Agent Dioge. It's also the 4th episode to not be set at the Flynn-Fletcher house after The Magnificent Few, Are You My Mummy, and Get That Bigfoot Out of My Face, the 2nd time in production order and the 3rd time in broadcast order that Doof can recognize Perry without his fedora after Get That Bigfoot Out of My Face and I Scream You Scream for the broadcast order, and the first time Isabella appears with the Fireside Girls out of uniform for the entire episode. But my final thoughts? This was a great episode, and it pays a lot of homage to some of my favorite Steven Spielberg works. Now, our last piece of this episode is the credit sequences, or just credit sequence in this case. So what happens is that Linda is asleep in bed, but then she gets woken up by Lawrence when he constantly replays the part that goes, fossils, da-da-da. And Linda smiles at him, and over the logos we hear the actual music of this.
Fossils.
As constant as this credit sequence can be, this was actually pretty funny, I gotta say. Additionally, Corey Burton is listed among the additional voices, and he's later gonna be the voice of the farmer in this show. Plus, he's also the current voice for other Disney characters like Captain Hook, Ludwig von Drake, and Dale of Chippendale. But overall, a very nice and funny credit sequence for this. In closing, as we segue into our roller coaster rating, I'm just gonna do this. Fossils. Dun dun dun. And finally, we shall now end things off with our roller coaster rating. Now, how would I rate this half-hour episode out of 10 roller coasters? I give It's About Time 9 roller coasters out of 10. It had a lot of good moments throughout and some good animation, even with a few minor setbacks.
I mean nitpicks.
And this episode I'd watch again at some point. And also Back to the Future and Jurassic Park references, because why not also throw in some hints of Steven Spielberg and Amblin films? But now let's get to our Twitter poll results from the last official episode, 1 month ago. But it looks like our reporter isn't here right now, so we've brought in a substitute for right now. Take it away. Hello there, this is the time-traveling reporter filling in for the other reporter you're familiar with. And I'm going through time while I give you the poll results from the last real episode. We asked our listeners, which of the following is your favorite song from hashtag Hamster and Gretel? Hashtag Danville Discussion poll. Now let's see here. Here we are. The choices were A. Overload the Grid, B. Ropa Vieja, C. Don't Steal from the Banks, or D. La Cebolla. 13% said Don't Steal from the Banks. Overload the Grid and La Cebolla were tied with 20%. But 47% said Ropa Vieja, making it the winner. And oh, I better set a course back for the past immediately before my time machine breaks down. I'm gonna pass it back to Caleb to give you his response and a brand new Twitter poll. This is the time-traveling reporter signing out. Thanks, and I hope you have some safe time traveling. But what would be my favorite out of these four? Well, Don't Steal from the Banks was pretty nice, Overload the Grid was a bop, and La Cebolla was good too, but none of these would ever top Ropa Vieja personally. I just love its groovy Latin pop nature, and I also love how Gretel and Kevin get along with each other to recreate the recipe, and Hamster dancing with the jalapenos tied around his body was just plain cute to see. While Overload the Grid is still a fun song from an okay yet kinda weak start to the show, and with Don't Steal from the Banks and La Cebolla, while I enjoy Cheer Cheer Bang Bang and the former song that was in it, I think La Ballad of La Cebolla was my favorite segment from episode 4, and the song itself was good too. But still, Ropa Vieja remains my favorite out of all those 4 songs, as Recipe for Disaster is my favorite episode in the show so far. But now we have a new poll out, and because the episode I just reviewed has some of my favorite moments with Dr. Doofenshmirtz, I've decided to ask my listeners who use Twitter. Which of these hashtag Phineas and Ferb episodes had your favorite moments of Dr. Doofenshmirtz? Hashtag Danville Discussion poll. And I've picked these choices. A. Lawn Gnome Beach Party of Terror, but I shortened it to just Lawn Gnome Beach Party because of the character limit in Twitter poll responses. B. Flop Stars. C. Raging Bully. Or D. It's About Time. To pick your vote, head over to Twitter and search for my other page at Caleb the PNF Guy or hashtag Danville Discussion Poll and let the voting begin. And that is all that I'm going to be going through this week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Danville Discussion. As for me, you can find me on my Facebook page at Real Caleb Dirksen, on my Twitter, Tumblr, and TikTok pages at Caleb Dirksen2 with the number 2 at the end, on my alternate Twitter page at Caleb the PNF Guy, on my Instagram pages at Caleb.Dirksen for my main page or at Caleb Flynn-Fletcher for my alternate page, and on my DeviantArt page at Caleb Dirksen20. You can also find me on Discord. Just type the username Caleb Dirksen, that's 2 words, and then the code number 4600. And if you go to the invite link in the description below, it'll also invite you to my Discord server so that you can talk with me about anything, including this podcast or my other content. You can also find me on YouTube. All you have to do is just search for Caleb Dirksen and look for the icon of me as a soldier. And if you want to support my work and get some great rewards all at once, which includes getting access to my content before anyone else, like my videos, my podcast episodes, etc., then you can become a patron at patreon.com/Caleb Dirksen. Your support would just be lovely. As for this podcast, we are available to listen on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and you can also find us on Anchor by using your Apple or Android device or going on the web at anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen. It'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion page. Now, if you have listened to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or another podcast service, do you mind going out to just rate and review this show? That would be just great if you're being respectful. But if you were listening to this episode as a video on YouTube, then click on that like button and leave us a little comment with your thoughts on this episode of Phineas and Ferb. You can also share your feedback or ask some questions by sending us an email at danvillediscussion@gmail.com with the series and episode title in the subject line. Join us next time, and I'll be jumping on to episode 5 of Hamster and Gretel, which has Comic Shop Copycat and Nay It Ain't So. Now tune in next time for the newest episode of the Danville Discussion and all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. And with that said, thank you guys so much for listening here, and until next time, and more to come, this is Caleb, over and out. This podcast was created strictly and only for entertainment and information purposes. It is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company, Disney Television Animation, or their affiliates. All and any names, images, clips, sounds, or other items related to Phineas and Ferb, Milo Murphy's Law, Hamster and Gretel, and other Disney properties are trademarks and or copyrights of their respective holders. All original content from this podcast is the intellectual property of the Danville Discussion and the host or hosts running the podcast, unless otherwise noted.
Fossils. Da, da, da. Boop. Fossils. Da, da, da. Boop. Fossils. Da, da, da.